Hey, Warrior Saints, good morning. Happy Friday. Welcome to our Crucifixional live stream. Glad to have you beautiful people with us. Father Chris here on this glorious Friday as we conclude Prodigal Son Week. There's this beautiful story. Greg has been teaching. We've been working on it all week in chapter 15 of Luke, where there's a young man, two sons, born into a house of a father who's apparently wealthy. The youngest, as you know the story, takes his inheritance and leaves. Living his own life, he ends up in the pig pen, which in the mindset of the Jewish milieu of the time, pigs are filthy, unclean animals. So it's to say that this guy was like as far away from the father's house as he could be. You know the story. He comes to himself and goes back to the father, repents, asks forgiveness, and is restored not as a slave, but as a son. So even in spite of his crucial lapse of judgment and decision making that caused him to be with the pigs, the father took him back, brought him back into his home. This, my brothers and sisters, is grace. So I want to talk a little bit about grace today and what it means. This word grace means a gift. It is not something that you can do to earn, right? So there's no actions or requisite deeds that you must do in order to receive the gift. It's just freely given. Perfect example. I love to use this one. It has struck me powerfully when my first child was born. They gave the baby to the mother, and they gave me the birth certificate. And as I looked at the birth certificate, we had decided, my bride and I, what we were going to name her. So I wrote Sophia, I wrote Renee, and then my hand hovered over last name. And I thought, wow, I'm about to give this kid my last name, which is my father's last name, and is incredibly important to me. Salami means something. It's a powerful name. It is a name of high repute value. I mean, it's my father, right? And I'm about to just give it to this kid. And she didn't do anything. I mean, she's screaming and crying, right? She's 1 minute old. And I'm just going to give her this name and all of the blessings and the benefits that go with it. Now, obviously, in my great love for her, I gave her my last name. But it struck me in that moment that she didn't do anything to earn or deserve or receive that name. It was freely a gift that I gave to her out of my great love. That's grace, right? So the kid now is well worth the name. But at that moment, it was just freely given to her. And this is how grace works according to Scripture, right? It is not something that we can earn. The prodigal son, when he goes back, he didn't do the right things or flip enough coins or, pay his father back or any of that kind of. There were no deeds that he did. He came back and the father just simply said, I love you. You were lost and you are found. You were dead and now you're alive. And he embraced him, brought him back. And importantly, like he puts his new clothes on him, kills the fatted calf, new shoes, but he gives him a ring. So he's restoring him freely. Because let's be honest, the son didn't deserve it. The son took his father's inheritance or his father's hard work, his share, and he squandered it with loose living and prostitution and gambling and drinking and smoking and pigs, right? So he didn't do anything to deserve that. He should have been thrown out or at best put in the barn with the slaves, right? Like he had he didn't do anything to deserve it. But grace, the Father gave him grace. And for us as warrior saints, when we are baptized, when we come to Christ to live a crucifixional life, it is not something that we do. It is not something that we earn. There's not enough good deeds. There's not enough prayers. There's not enough tithing to the church, though those things are all important and we must do them. Those do not earn us a spot in the Father's house. It is completely an act of grace. It is God doing what maybe he shouldn't do for some of us wretched sinners, but he does it anyway because he loves us. Interesting side note, that's why in the Orthodox Church we baptize infants. Right? Sometimes our Protestant brothers and sisters get confused. What are you baptizing infants? They don't know about Jesus. Exactly. It's grace. He gives that newness to the child in spite of the child, right? And so this gracious positioning of God, what he gives to us, putting us in his household, is simply an act of his love in spite of us, not because of us, in spite of us, right? So it's not because of our good deeds that God puts us in this position. It's in spite of our sinfulness that he puts us in this position. That, beloved, is grace. Now you hear this in Ephesians chapter 2, where he says, for by grace you have been saved through faith. And people often say, see, all I have to do is believe in God. That's not really what that says, but That's a conversation for another day. For grace you have been saved through faith, and listen to the rest of it. We got to read the whole verse. And this, meaning your faith, is not your own doing. It is the gift of God, lest any man should boast. Right? Even what Paul is saying, even your faith is not a chit, a credit, a coin in your bank account to say, see, I deserve God's grace. Even your faith is not enough to earn you God's grace. He just gives it to you. And here's the message I want to impart today about grace. Now that we've kind of quickly gone through it, the message is, what do you now do with it? Very often people assume that grace is like the end, right? Like, I've been saved by God, right? And it's done and it's over and I can just live my life now and I'm getting into heaven, right? All Christians think that in some sense, whether you're Catholic or Orthodox or Protestant of whatever denomination, we all have some twisted form in our mind that now I've been given this grace, it's the end. But indeed, grace is not the end. In fact, it's the beginning. You've been taken out of this household, sin, and put into God's household, which is unto life. Now you have to live. Do you understand? You have been made for greater by that gracious act of God. Now go live your life as a warrior saint, being crucifixional every single day. Do you understand? Let's go back to my image about my kid and signing the birth certificate. I gave her my father's last name. I gave it to her. She didn't earn it, didn't do it. She was screaming, pooping all over the place. She was an infant, 2 months old, 2 minutes old, and there's nothing she did to earn it. I gave it to her. But now, I expect that she lives her life accordingly. Do you understand? It wasn't the end for her. Her life wasn't just complete because she became a salami. Her life was just beginning. And now I have tried to teach and instruct and help raise her, and she's an amazing, amazing young woman. But I gave her commandments and laws and rules and instructions and teaching unto life, and she has to live it. That name can also be taken from her. Do you understand? You have been made for greater. In your baptism, you're coming to Christ. He has made you new, whole, pristine, a child of God. That's not the end, brothers and sisters. It's the beginning. And now you have to do your own work in your own life to get yourself on the way, on the path of being a Christ-like warrior saint in everything that you do. So grace is awesome because it puts us in a good position. It starts us with a new name, a child of God. But now we have to live that life. Do you understand? That's the message. And that God has given that to you. He has said there's hope for you. There's potential for you. The kingdom is ahead of you. It's not yours yet. You're still alive. We're not dead. But it's there. It's in the path in front of you. Go get some. That's the message of grace. It's your beginning point. It's your starting off point. Now you have to do your own work. Your own work means, as I said, you have been made for greater. You've been made to be something exceptional, something special, not like everybody else, not like the rabble in the world or all the chaos that's out there. You've been made for something greater. But to do that, you have to live a crucifixional life. You got to be a warrior saint. I mean, that's just what it is. That's why we teach it, because it is the thing. And to do that is sometimes daunting. It's awfully difficult because, there's a lot of forces out there that are trying to stop you from being who you're supposed to be, to find that greatness, to find that warrior saintness, if I may, inside of you. And it's distracting. Sometimes we don't think clearly. We don't see clearly. Maybe sometimes we don't even think at all, and we just accept what's thrown at us and we embrace that. And then we find ourselves kind of like the prodigal in a pig pen here, and we get distraught or lost with it. Well, that's not just a you problem. That's an all of us problem. Everyone faces that. Some won't admit it. Most of us, we like to set it aside because it's uncomfortable. But it is not something that is just your problem. You are like all of us who so desperately need a guiding light, a principle, the Lord, to help keep us on the path, the right path, to living that fulfilled life. Because we, as I said, have been made for something greater. So when you find yourself in a chaotic state of being in a pig pen, recognize you do not have to do the rest all by yourself. God gives you His grace, His love, and as you are journeying towards that greater, you have a guide, and that's called the way of the warrior saint. It's why we're here. You don't have to do that by yourself. In fact, we're doing it with you. We want you to join us. It's time to stop trying to navigate these waters all by yourself and get on the way of the warrior saint. Join the army. There's enough of us that it's growing every single day to find ourselves on the right path. And in the way of the warrior saint, you have access to a library that's filled with teachings that come directly from Scripture, from God Himself, but in a very practical and implementable way. So all of a sudden you can say, all right, I may be struggling with this particular challenge or this particular issue. I don't quite know how God would want me to get through that. When you visit warriorsaints.org and subscribe to the library, you're going to get full and unlimited access to all of the teachings that we put forth that say, oh, this problem, this challenge, here's how you deal with it. Here's what God said. Here's some ideas. Here's some actual practical tools that you can implement in your life to become that great man, that great woman that you have been called to be. It's pretty simple. It ain't easy, for sure, but it is simple. It's beautiful. It's fun. We invite you to join us on the way. We're fighting and scrapping every single day. Some of us are not great, even though we were made for greater, but we're doing our own work. We invite you to join us by becoming a warrior saint. We'll be back on Sunday morning at 9 and 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time for Orthros and Divine Liturgy. And then, of course, Monday next week, we're going to have a fun week. We're going to talk about polarity and division and fighting and all of that kind of good stuff. So make sure you join us next Monday as well. Love you. See you soon. Get on the way. It's time. You're made for greater. Do your work. And as always, keep walking on the way of the warrior saint.